Are you ready for our movie of the week?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so what movie are we talking about today? But actually, not just what movie are we watching, but why are we talking about this specific movie this week?
We're talking about the 2004 film, The Passion of the Christ.
Hey, very, very Christian of us.
Yes,
So
yes, we have succeeded.
I kind of have an overarching agenda for this episode vaguely in my head. It's not too vague. I guess I kind of articulated it. But like what how did it read to you? Like where are we going with this, do you think?
So I think the general structure was a discussion on Christian engagement and culture,
Right.
which we've talked at length about just in our own personal conversations.
Yeah.
I know we roughly know where each other stands on the topic and
Mm-hmm.
and all of that stuff and all the many ways that culture intersects in the life of the Christian and how we as Christians should interact with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so I
sometimes
remember, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to sometimes it's interesting how that intersects with films
Mm-hmm.
in particular.
Yeah, we've talked about, I mean, it's tough because I'm sure we probably wouldn't do this if we knew more of the individuals involved in the creation of certain things. But like we've had our fun mocking, cheesy Christian movies. And so like I remember, back when the original Kirk Cameron Left Behind came out, my church was passing out, free tickets for people to go and be warned of the rapture and all that. And looking back on that now, not only was like the film just poor quality compared to Hollywood stuff, but my theology has changed on that, and it's but like just looking back on it, it's like I know how I feel about that now. And then I remember when the Passion of the Christ came out. It was sort of a weird cultural moment where Ash is in the chat. How's it going, Ash? Good to see you. Yeah, I remember when it came out, and it was like it was a quality film by someone who had made films before, funded it himself, a name everybody knew, and it was like full blown Hollywood quality movie, but just a straight recounting of the Passion of the Christ. And so it's like part of me is like, okay, well, why can't Christians do this all the time? What makes the difference
Right.
here? And so it's one of the reasons I get a little bit amped when I see at the very least like conservative engagement in culture, things like the Daily Wire. I was just joking with you before, like I don't intentionally leech off Daily Wire news, but like in terms of channel growth, but every time I talk about the Daily Wire, like I struggle to hit 100 views on my channel sometimes with different videos, but like I touch on a trending Daily Wire conservative media controversy and it's like 6,000 views on this last one I just did.
Right.
50 new subscribers is like, oh geez, I don't want to take advantage of this too much, but like what am I supposed to do with this information? It's like but yeah, it was funny on that total side trail here. I'm feeling insecure probably right now is the problem after having back and forth conversations with people on the recent news I covered. Some of you who follow the channel might know what I'm talking about, but there was this whole recent controversy between Crowder, Daily Wire. We almost talked about it today, but I covered it ad nauseum already. But like someone in the comment section was like disagreeing with me, which is fine. I got a little annoyed and I'm like, look, if you buy this point, you're buying into these like Marxist assumptions or whatever. I probably said it hastily. I think the point I made was valid enough, but like it wasn't helpful to the conversation. But then they look at my channel. I could tell like they got upset with that. Then they go back to the channel. They go, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Like he says, my Christian brother, you're just you're not the intellectual that you think you are. You're way over your head here. And
Oh,
I'm
goodness.
sorry, you can't hit 1,000 views per video. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't hit 100 views per video. I'm sorry, I bullied you. And I
Oh
was
gosh.
like, okay. So, anyways,
Block.
no, I'll let it stand. I'm not going to be petty and censor my comments. It sort of defeats the purpose. But, anyways, I'm just feeling insecure. That's why I'm ranting about this. So like and subscribe, boost my ego. I guess that's why I went on that rant. But all that to say, this all is sort of integrated in my head and like trying to sort out how we do cultural engagement as Christians in an effective way. I try to do it to some extent with this channel. I see what's trending, and it's a difficult balance on YouTube trying to you know talk about what's trending, but also what you're interested in without sort of selling out what you're in, just talking about what people want to hear, you know. And yeah, it's so all of that kind of relates to then how I look over it, like the film industry. It's like you see like these moments occasionally, like with something like Passion of the Christ, where it's like people were excited about it, and it was like strangely simple in its presentation of Christianity. Um, One of the things I like want to achieve, like on a channel like this, is what I am starting to call, and I'm trying to focus it more, is what I'm starting to call fully integrated Christianity. I'll probably talk about this more when we get to the final section of the podcast today, what I mean by that. But like, I find Christians tend to compartmentalize themselves. Like they compartmentalize their lives internally, but then they sort of compartmentalize themselves off away from the world. Like the world isn't God's, you know.
Mm.
Regardless, I mean, we'll probably talk. I'll probably bring up eschatology or whatever later. But regardless of, I think that relates a lot, and I'll say why. But like, regardless of your eschatology, you have to believe the world is the Lord's, even
Hmm.
though you think that the enemy is. There's different views of the nature of the enemy's influence over the world based on your eschatology, your theology in different areas. But like, even over and above that, you have to believe the God is the king of the world. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, uh, what does that mean to you, and how does that impact the way that you see your role in the world? It's a big question.
It's one of the things that I never really understood about dispensationalism,
Hmm.
and having spent a little time in that, especially the pre-trib rapture camp of that.
Hmm.
Like they had such a negative view towards interacting with culture, and like to the point of, you know, um trying to string a coherent thought here. You know, like really being afraid of what the culture was doing and is the way it's expressing itself, you know, like especially right now in the climate we have today with, you know, all the various things, you know, LGBTQI plus, and, you know, just I guess all the way that things really, um the political landscape, the economy, anything you can kind of put under that
Hmm.
umbrella. And I always thought that if you truly believed in the doctrinal teaching of, you know, the that eschatology,
Hmm.
you would be pretty excited by that, because that would mean like the end was nigh, right?
Hmm.
Wouldn't you be excited that the culmination was coming soon? But
Hmm.
yet it seems like there's an inherent fear built
Hmm.
into that structure, and I was in that for 30 something years, so like, you know, I have
Hmm.
felt the fear
Yeah. Yeah.
tactics of it.
Yeah. So, what was it you think that made, Passion of the Christ work as a? I mean, we can talk about its underlying Catholicism to an extent, and I think that's important in interpreting it and all of that. But it's still, it was simple. It was presented simply enough that the I think the basic story of the Gospels was there, the culmination of it.
Yeah.
Um, why did it work in that context where it didn't work in so many other contexts?
Um, I think one possible influence was it wasn't too shortly after 9/11, and where America was at that time was a little bit different than they are in 2023.
That's right. It was
Um,
three.
it,
Yeah. Wow. That's an
I mean,
interesting
just
point.
like to frame it a little bit, you know, I hadn't
Yeah.
even really thought of that until just right now, but
Yeah.
um, I imagine kind of the overall climate was just a little bit different.
Hmm.
As far as other factors, I think quality of film, you know, like just the production value, you know, to this is the production company that put out Braveheart, you know, like this is top-notch quality. What
Haven't they said a sequel is in the works? I've heard this.
I've heard that supposedly someone directly asked Mel Gibson's production company and they denied it, but that doesn't
Okay,
mean anything.
I suppose.
To me, that doesn't mean anything. They've also denied that there's other Star Wars movies in the process, yet there's a Star Wars movie blocked out for 2027 or something like that on the
Yeah.
official calendar. So,
Hmm. Right. That'd be interesting if they like it was about like I mean there's lots of angles you could take with that in terms of is it about the resurrection? Is it about the Book of Acts
yeah.
or what, you know?
There
But
was another film that came out where it took place right after Jesus was raised from the dead. That Hollywood, like, big production company put out. I can't remember what year it was. I think Joseph Fiennes was in it. Ray Fiennes' brother.
I think I
Um,
might know what you're talking about.
he
Yeah.
also played as Luther in the movie about
Yep.
Martin Luther.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
played
yeah, yeah.
Martin Luther.
Right. I remember. I didn't see it,
Um,
but yeah.
yeah, I both again though. I know we're not talking about that movie, but again, higher quality value. Although it didn't have the draw that this movie had. I will say, I don't think it did as well in the
Hmm.
box office.
Yep. So how did you feel overall about the movie? I think basically so far we've been positive in what we're saying.
Hmm.
How did you feel about it? How did it strike you? I think when I saw it originally, I didn't have the eyes to see perhaps the theological influences as much as
Yeah,
I might right now. There's still some questions I would have surrounding that. I'd want to read up more, but I mean, we know the details of the faith of Mel Gibson,
right.
and how that may have come into it. How did it hit you originally, and how informed were you at the time? What have you thought of since then?
Yeah. So I was in Bible college.
Okay,
Um,
in 2004.
yep.
Oh,
I went to Bible.
that makes sense. It just sounds so
I
early to me. I
Yeah.
started 2006, so it's not that surprising.
So I started Bible college in the fall of '03. So I would have been, I think this was early 2004. So I think I was still a freshman when it came out.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, going into it, I didn't really have a ton of expectations. I will say that the reason I brought up Bible college was not because, oh, that framed my theology for it, but kind of framed where my head was at for it.
Yeah.
The Bible college that I was at, part of a larger ministry, had a very negative view on the movie before it even came out.
Okay. Because
They
they.
were arguing you shouldn't go
Uh huh.
because of Mel Gibson and his Catholicism,
Okay.
and ironically, there was one professor. Um, he was on one of their radio programs or something like that, and he brought up like some Islamic influence, and I was just like,
Eh.
he was a bit into that kind of over the topness, conspiracy type stuff.
Okay.
Kind of dabbled in the weird.
Okay.
Um, the stuff you'd scratch your head and go, I don't know what book you're reading or movie you saw, but
As an
okay.
aside, that's something I really. It's probably something I'm going to make videos about in the future. I've texted you before about it, but just processing conspiracy theory thinking, particularly among like fellow conservative Christians.
Yeah,
It's something lately, particularly given news stories I've talked about recently. Uh, it can be like micro things and macro things,
yeah,
but like breaking that down, it's driving me so crazy lately. Like I'm having a lot of feelings, and it's
yeah.
just I want to. I
Well,
want.
from the pastoral perspective, and I'm not divulging any hidden information,
I know a couple
but
things you
I
told
can
me.
relate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. But in this particular instance, I didn't really have a high bar expectation for the film, other than I liked Mel Gibson movies at the time.
Hmm.
This was a little bit before his
His
kind of
debacle.
yeah, yeah. Um, and people have made the argument that this movie showed some of his anti-Semitism.
Hmm.
Uh, you know,
Where do you stand? I don't know how I don't know where I've heard strong statements
yeah,
interpreting the events surrounding that, like how serious it was. Like, where do you stand on like how much was that like a stupid drunken rant, and how much did it actually reflect something he thinks?
yeah. I
Like,
don't know. I think even when it happened, I listened to like the audio of it or something like that, and it just sounded like a drunk man being stupid. But
Uh-huh.
I guess I don't know enough of him and his personal life to really
It was before
make a fully
cancel
formed.
culture was really a thing, but he
Yeah,
did get canceled for years.
yeah,
But he came back with a vengeance with good movies, you know.
yeah.
So
I've kind of been more on the side of the guy had some addiction issues that needed some healing there.
yeah, yep.
More so than like was he anti-Semitic? I don't know. And
Well, the problem
I
was
guess
like
I'm
they tried to see that in the movie.
yeah,
I think even before the event there in his life,
yeah,
there were statements of that, but the line he took out in terms of the subtitles or whatever, where it was a quotation from scripture
right,
where the Jewish leaders said, like, his blood will be on us and on our hands and the hands of our children. Like,
yeah,
you know, I think there's a not anti-Semitic way to interpret that,
right.
and apply that, and
And also
we
these
don't
are
know
the
what.
events.
What's that?
These are the events of Scripture.
That's what I'm
You know.
saying. Like, you
Yeah,
know, he didn't include everything in scripture, but he chose to include that and then kind of
yeah,
not include it. And but just the fact that it's scripture means like we don't know his motivation for including that,
right.
you know.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
whatever.
It's tough to know. I mean, I guess you could also say if you were Italian, like the movie was anti-Italian because it was Roman soldiers putting them on the cross. Like if that's the reason why you're claiming anti-Semitism, it's a
Hmm.
pretty weak argument.
Hmm.
Seeing that historically, as someone who holds a biblical worldview and a biblical worldview of history, it was Jewish people that cried for Jesus to be put on the cross for him to be executed. So,
Hmm.
you know, it's not anti-Semitic to say something that's historically accurate.
Right.
Um, but all
Hmm.
that to say, the movie when I did see it, um, was hugely impactful in the moment. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, I I cried pretty hard watching
Hmm.
the movie.
Hmm.
Had a big emotional response to it. There were definitely parts of the movie that I could see the Roman Catholicism.
That's what I'd
Um,
like to know your opinion on, because I
yeah,
know like a couple. I probably the extent of what comes to mind
yeah,
right off the bat is like I heard he used like some classical like Roman Catholic artwork
yeah.
for the
Like
framing.
the Stations of the Cross.
Yeah, the Stations of the Cross where the times Jesus fell. Those are all in the movie. That's
Yep.
Catholic tradition.
Yeah.
And there's a few other things like that, I guess, that aren't biblical,
There.
but they're extra biblical tradition rooted
Yeah.
in Catholicism. None of it's like particularly, you know, theologically deep. It's just
Right.
imagery mostly.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. There was some imagery that I would say was extra biblical, and obviously from, pardon me, from Roman Catholicism. But as a Protestant, it wasn't entirely offensive in the moment. You know, like
No,
watching it, I recognized for what it was. You know,
like I mean, I don't think. I mean, maybe I'm being ignorant, but I don't know that they have any significantly theological
no,
claims based on the idea that Jesus fell down like what 7 times. I don't know what it was, but
yeah.
like, do they attach some weird, uh,
If they
liturgical
do,
thing to that?
if
Yeah,
they do, I'm not aware of it.
right. Yeah.
Um, other than that, let me think. There was a weird scene. There was a weird scene um in the garden,
Hmm.
Gethsemane, where there was like a duel between him and Satan,
Hmm.
and it was just a little over the top, but
Where he
whatever.
stomps on the
His
snake,
What's that?
where he stomps on the snake's head.
Yeah, yeah. Like it was interpretive, and I
Hmm.
was okay with the snake's head imagery, but to me, the stomping on the snake's head took place on the cross, not in the garden. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I would like because I know because I know he's Roman Catholic and he's not
yeah,
LDS. Like I
right.
wouldn't read too much into that personally, just because
Yeah, yeah.
in LDS circles, like the atonement began. I don't know if it fully happened or began. I think it began in the garden,
Okay.
and they sort of stretched it out. I think there's some weird like charismatic. skewed theology in some circles related to that, but I can't say that for sure. But
Probably.
but yeah, but like I don't think he intended anything like
Yeah.
that. To me,
I
the stomping on the snake's head was like, okay, I'm beginning my work here of fulfilling
yeah.
the prophecy in Genesis 3. It's like that's
I think
cool.
actually it was even before the snake's head thing that bothered me. It was like the imagery of Satan,
Hmm.
him like kind of the way he was portrayed. That was like, this is weird.
Tempting.
Not offensive, just weird.
Yeah, well, you know what it was? I think it was a female actor with a male's
Mm,
voiceover.
okay.
He wanted it to be off-putting and strange.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, he
so,
succeeded.
yeah, so I mean, if he accomplished what he
Yeah.
intended, that's cool. But
But yeah, no, I mean to see such a vivid portrayal of the crucifixion.
Mhm.
Um, I've only watched the movie once. I've
Yeah,
never been able to bring myself to watch it again.
I think I've seen it
Um,
2 or 3 times, maybe. I don't
yeah,
know.
I
Yeah,
think because I had a pretty emotional response to it,
yeah. I
it's been
remember.
hard.
I don't know that I did necessarily. I have trouble just movies in general. There are certain kinds of movies that will do something like that to me, but it's not things of like a violent, gruesome
Yeah.
nature or.
Well,
But
it wasn't. I don't even think it was the gruesomeness. I mean, that was definitely part of it, but just
sure.
it was the gruesomeness tied to the fact that this was Jesus. You
Right,
know.
right. Yeah, no, I don't want to take away from that.
Yeah.
But at my point, I mean, just
Just the
generally,
gruesome level. Yeah.
it takes a lot for a movie to do something to me. It's actually some pretty subtle things that would do that to me. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I wept watching Wreck-It Ralph, so um
yeah. What was I going to say about that? Yeah, no, no. I remember a story with my pastor at the time that it came out. He said I heard that he like this the showing he was in, like everyone in the crowd was crying, like everyone was silent, and like he felt inspired to get up and preach the gospel afterwards, and he did.
oh,
So that's
that's
quite a
incredible.
story. So yeah, I mean, hey,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it's funny. You want to know the kind of stuff that makes me cry? Like I cried a little bit at Be Kind Rewind. You ever see that? You ever see that movie?
I have, yeah.
I love that movie. I don't know why. But the
I'll
end,
watch it again.
it's like subtle humor, just weird, and then suddenly boom, it's like this emotional, like, oh, this
Yeah.
was all kind of leading. And then Diary of a Mad Black Woman made me cry.
Okay.
You ever see that?
Yeah.
That's a good movie.
Well, some of Tyler Perry's early stuff,
It's early stuff. Then he
his
got
early
all
stuff really had a lot of deep meaning to it. You know,
then he got
obviously.
all Oprah-fied, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a whole
Some of his
nother.
early stuff I really got into.
Yeah.
But yeah, I legitimately cried. It wasn't Wreck-It Ralph, it was the second one, Ralph Breaks the Internet. Um, and not because of its portrayal of the internet, but its portrayal of friendship at the end hit
Uh-huh.
me like a ton of bricks. So
Yeah. But it makes me feel bad because it's like Passion of the Christ, the most
yeah,
intense symbolic thing relating to my faith. And it's like I don't cry, and then like Be Kind Rewind. Come on. But I don't know. Hard to explain. But
well, I've been in churches that would have said they would have said something pretty harshly just for having any reaction to anything other than the gospel.
uh-huh.
If you've you know yelled at a football game but are afraid to lift your hands in church, then there's something wrong with you.
Mm. Man. So all that being said, like we're talking about the quality of the movie. Uh I mean, we haven't criticized it too harshly in regards to its Roman Catholic. Some people have like something I'm going to have to look up is James White. I think had some more in-depth criticism because he's like extremely well versed in Roman Catholicism, and he doesn't do the shallow conspiracy theory stuff.
Right.
Um, and so like I would watch. I'd probably my thoughts might shift a bit. Like if I went back and saw his thoughts on it,
Yeah.
noticing things that I missed and themes. But like as of now, it's like I think it's relatively simple and straightforward in the story it tells, and it's
Yeah.
mostly biblical.
Yeah, and like I can remember distinctly I did speak to that professor after watching the movie, and one of his complaints, because he did go and watch it,
Mhm.
one of his complaints was like things being taken out of context from scripture and adding to scripture, and like I can't remember exactly the things he was commenting on, but I just remember like I went back and looked in the, you know, four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and tried to like cross reference what I saw with what what was in Scripture, and lo and behold, like the like two areas he had the biggest problems were from Mark's account,
Mhm.
and I was like, how can you like how can you have this argument that it's anti-biblical when it's right here? Like, you
Right.
just didn't know the reference. Like,
Right.
that's all it was. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
know it.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
But, so all that being said, like, how does this movie, like, inform how you want Christians to handle cinema? Um,
Yeah.
because it's like it did well. There was quality behind its production, and but it was done by a Roman Catholic, and like probably if he expanded more theologically, we probably would start disagreeing more and more. But like, how would you how should people who agree with us more pursue artistic things in this way, in a way that would succeed? I mean, like, what do
I
you think
would,
would be a good Protestant movie?
yeah.
Like,
A good Protestant movie would be a movie about whatever topic, whatever future, past, present, whatever, that's
mhm,
done really well.
right,
That to me that would be a great Protestant made, Christian made film. It doesn't have to be from the Bible. It
hmm,
could be a story that someone wrote, um, that's influenced by their Christian worldview. Like
right,
we're talking about kind of crossing streams here, but with like the conservative cultural engagement as well. Like, what does that look like? Just make good movies. Like,
right.
make good quality things.
And this is something I've talked about. Like, I'm breaking into probably the topic I want to talk about later. This will be kind of our theology corner topic. But like, this informs like how I do my gaming channel. Like, I had someone
Yeah.
ask me a question. Like he was someone like I'm not a huge YouTuber. I have like a past 2,000 subs on my gaming channel. Um, but like it's still not a lot. It doesn't Numbers don't necessarily mean anything in regards to like your viewers per stream or per video or whatever. But like it's bigger than like a guy who came in my chat and had a few hundred at the time, like maybe more like this channel. But he's asking like, how did I get where I am? I'm like, I don't know, like, and he says like, as a Christian YouTuber, and I'm like, and he's
Mhm.
like, well, I do kind of like a Bible study while I'm playing Sonic.
Hmm.
And I was like, if it's working for you, that's great. I didn't like lay into him anything, but like my philosophy was like, again, I want fully integrated Christianity is how I talk about it. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I want to engage with a video game and enjoy a video game with the attitude and mindset and vision of a Christian.
Yeah.
Okay, and that might or might not come out in my words while I'm playing it. Um, I'm not saying it shouldn't. I'm not saying you should hide it. I'm not saying any of those things. But like, this is a gaming channel, and I'm going to enjoy this as a Christian because it's a gift from God. Right,
Yeah.
and then when I want to do a Bible study or talk theology, that's what this channel's for.
Yeah.
And so when we talk
Yeah.
theology, I want to go all out talking about theology and talking about this stuff because that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. If that makes sense. And so,
It
and also
does.
practically speaking, like it confuses the algorithm if you try to have really separate topics in one video, but
Mm.
that's a whole nother.
Well, I think related to art, um, where one of the areas where this touches in my life is before, I guess I still kind of am befuddled at times how I've ended up exactly where I'm at right now. Like, I'm serving as a full-time pastor right now, who dabbles in travel agency. But before all of this, I did a lot of music work. I for a little while was a, um, professional musician, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I
Mhm.
made a majority of my income from music. That's how I'll say it. Um, and also doing my own songwriting and stuff like that. So when I was making money from music, it was just as a guitar player. But I also wrote music and recorded my own band. Um, we didn't want to necessarily have the gimmick of being a quote unquote Christian band because that usually means you have to have a certain sound. You have to, sound exactly like whatever comes on your top 40 Christian radio, you know. It all sounds very polished and pristine, and some of it's really good, and some of it's just kind of in a can. It's just kind of, you know, the cookie cutter music.
Mm.
Um, the one thing about my writing, I will say, is I've never been really good at writing anything outside of what I guess would be um, really blatantly obvious Christian lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we never wanted to be quote unquote like, oh, that's just Christian pop music or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
our style, our like musical style, was just what we knew. So my good friend who started the band with me, like he grew up in Louisiana, so a lot of his music was influenced by Southern rock and gospel influences and stuff like that. So our style was very different than the type of stuff you would hear on K-Love. Oops, I was purposely trying not to mention their name. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that slipped
Positive,
out.
encouraging.
It
Uh,
slipped out.
oh no.
Um, but when you do that, also, talent obviously is an issue too. But when you do that, when you purposely try to do something that's a little different, like you're probably not going to have a lot of success or a big
Mm-hmm.
influence because you know blatantly Christian lyrics with a different sounding musical
Mm-hmm.
arrangement is not going to hit K Love, and it's also not going to hit the other radio stations.
Yeah.
We had a little bit of success with some indie stuff, but that was about it.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to see people just make music because they love making music, and what I love is when it's from Christian believers who are just wanting to make good authentic music that's artistic and creative and different and quality, and honestly, with the technology nowadays, you can make quality in your home.
Mm-hmm.
It is totally possible.
Mm-hmm.
And same would go for movies and books. I would love for there to be more authors, and here, let me clarify, there are people who are making films and making um writing stories and books and things like that that are quality, um, enjoyable materials. And so that's what I want to see. Is like, don't you don't have to give me a um, God's Not Dead 89. Um, give me something that's actually got some merit where it can stand on its own legs.
Mm-hmm.
That someone poured their heart and soul into. And that's not to say people didn't put their heart and soul into those other movies. It's just it's not my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm. I could, if I talk more, I mean, I think we already kind of have crossed over a little bit, but like, if I talk too much more about this, we're basically going to be doing theology corner, but so I'll save some thoughts on that.